everyone, thank you. Welcome to session 1. This is Views from the Frontline and Lived Experience. I'm Danni Barnes, I'm Director of Development and Partnerships at NEA, and before we start we're just going to show a short video from some of our clients.
Well, we live in a 2-bedroom semi-detached. My wife, unfortunately, is the only one that works these days because I went into hospital walking and I came out in a wheelchair. So my wife, unfortunately, is the breadwinner. Where there was 2 at the end of last year, there's now 1. So we were down £20,000 to start with, and my wife, she only works 32 hours a week or thereabouts. So unfortunately, she's under the £20,000 mark. And we can live, yeah, but there's sort of existing, to be quite honest, the bills just at the minute seem insurmountable. I just got a demand today for another £850. And I haven't a clue where they think we're going to get that from, and I just don't know where people are going to find this. But when you're only coming out with sort of, we'll say, £17,000 a year, if you're paying £3,000 of that to gas and electric, you're automatically down to £14,000. You either heat or you eat for a lot of people. And I can see me not heating the house until my wife or my grandchild that lives with until they come home. I don't mind being a little bit cold. You know, being up north, you get used to it. But honestly, it's going to drag a lot of people down this. It's just a no-win situation, whatever you're in. Unfortunately, this winter is doom, gloom and despondency.
All the celebration, all the birthday parties would be in my house, you know, the family birthday parties used to be in my house, you know. It's a very happy and, you know, open, you know, cheerful house. One Christmas when I was just moving the Christmas tree from there, and I saw this dampness, you know, like, and I thought could be the kids, you know, spilled some water or something, you know, you know, and I touched it like that, you know, the wall was all, you know, wet, and I said, oh goodness. And then my neighbor, she started, you know, complaining about the mushroom were growing in her, you know, bedroom wall.
Community people used to come here
as well, yeah.
Or from all around. It went like that. I'm ashamed when they come in, so we're not doing anything.
Good for children to be sleeping here. My grandchildren used to sleep, you know, and I said not good because of their health. They were only little and I didn't want them to, you know, have any like asthma problem or breathing problem because of the dampness.
Because of the fungus, I got the fungus on my lungs. So I'm suffering with the fungus on my lung. So they're treating me in Manchester Hospital. And that time nearly died in the hospital. They given me a week or something like that because there was so much fungus on my lungs.
My son's got autism and chronic ADHD, so obviously I'm on benefits at the moment, and it's hard having to say to my child, I haven't got the money. I've never had to say anything like that to him before. Every night time, my son's been really good. He likes his PlayStation. He hasn't been playing on it as much because he gets worried that he's using up too much electricity. Not using the cooker anymore. Using the microwave, which I didn't used to use often, but because that's cheaper than an oven. Don't use a toaster anymore, so we don't have toast because it was raking up the bills. Cutting down on washing. I'm not washing as much as I used to, which could be every day, because Luke can be quite a messy child with his autism. So I'm waiting until it's full loads constantly. I'm permanently watching what I'm using and what I'm doing, which we never had to do before. Yeah, we won't be using the heating at all. It's going to be onesies and quilts, and there's not a chance heating's going on because I just can't afford it. Candles as well, probably, instead of lights. It's bad enough now, and if it's going up again, there's just not a chance. He's in clubs as well. We're going to have to cancel one of us. He's in a swimming club, and he's also in a martial arts club, and we've had discussions about which one he's going to have to stop going to. Nobody wants to be in this situation, do they? Never had to ask for help before. I can't see a way around this situation at all.
So obviously that was a really powerful reflection of some of the experiences of our clients. It's worth noting that we've been able to offer advice to all of those individuals, but it's really, really difficult right now. It's something that's kind of unimaginable. Millions remain in crisis, so we're obviously offering advice to thousands of people, and many people here also, but millions are remaining in crisis, and every day we receive more desperate pleas from clients struggling to cope with the price rises. Something that really stood out for me from that video is we are only existing. What kind of life is that to live? Just yesterday we received an email from a client, and I'm actually going to read it out because it can do far better justice to the situations people are feeling at the moment than I can. So sorry for the late reply. I'm really struggling this week, both financially and mentally. I can't stop panicking because I'm running out of electricity and I'm struggling to get my electricity company to give me any more credit. I'm freezing cold and it's making me feel like I'd rather be dead now. I can't cope anymore. I don't understand why I deserve this or why it's happened. I haven't had a shower for 5 weeks as I have no family to ask for such things. My electricity is £13 a day for just one heater and boiling my kettle. I've got £15 left on the meter and it's not going to last me until Friday. I'm so depressed and cold. Is there anywhere I can stay instead of this house? I'm struggling to be happy that I'm even alive. Those are the types of emails that once upon a time we would get few and far between. Now it's a daily occurrence for our Frontline advice team. Our Warm and Safe Homes advice line delivers both benefits and energy advice, and we've seen demand triple, and I know many advice agencies in the room will be sharing a similar experience. Data from Joseph Rowntree Foundation indicates that a worrying number of children are now in very deep poverty. Not just poverty, but not able to afford any basic essentials. No food, not able to have a shower, not able to put the heating on. 7.2 million households are going without essentials, and over 4.7 million households are falling behind with their bills. These are huge numbers, and it's really hard to see what next for those individuals. Save the Children recently reported that head teachers are saying that children are eating rubbers because they are so hungry. I've been involved in the advice industry for about 15 years now, from a frontline volunteer advisor through to my role now at NEA, and I don't think I've ever seen it so difficult. Once upon a time we had what we'd call like a toolbox of options for helping individuals, and that toolbox is almost empty. More often than not, we're having to rely on hardship funds and sticking plasters. You don't enter the advice sector because you want to give people sticking plasters. You want to make sustainable differences to their lives. The team are always making a difference to individuals, but it is so much harder now than it ever has been before. Because of that, we've invested quite substantially in protecting the resilience of our frontline teams. So we've worked on professional boundaries training, a huge amount of peer-to-peer support, and mental health and resilience in the workplace. It was really important to us running into the winter that we made sure that our teams were properly and effectively supported, because it is really hard going. I hope you can appreciate, just from hearing a few stories today, and you'll hear more from our panel in a short while, it is really tough going and very difficult to hear, but it's important that we do hear it and we do listen to the real lived experiences of individuals that are struggling through this crisis, because that's the only way we can work out what we need to do more to make a difference to those people. So that's enough from me. What I would like to do now is introduce our panel. I'm glad to be joined by Rachel Jones, Chief Exec at Act on Energy, Mark Thomas, Area Manager, Head of Prevention at Merseyside Fire and Rescue, Geraldine O'Connor, a campaigner and one of our lived experience speakers, and Dominic Watters, who is a writer and speaker, also an ambassador for the Food Foundation, and also will bring with him some lived experience as well. If you don't mind, Geraldine, can I invite you to the podium? If you could all welcome Geraldine as well.
well, I can't find my spectacles, so I'm just going to have to make it up. So sorry if I bore you all. I've got a little timer to stop me talking, because I have a tendency to talk too much. Terribly sorry about that. Anyway, I suppose I'd be said to have lived experience. I'm with British Gas, I've got dual fuel, and I'm on the Priority Services Register. So there are certain rules to that, as you all know. They're meant to read my meter every quarter. They can't install a prepayment meter. They can't send a debt. Oh, thank you. They can't send the debt collectors round to bully me and install one of these prepayment meters. But they did. They broke all the rules. But basically, because the minute I knew they were cutting legal aid, I started teaching myself law because I knew the fight was on. So basically, I know my rights under the Equality Act, and I immediately contacted my local MP, and she got the warrant ripped up, luckily. But unfortunately, lots of vulnerable people out there, they don't know their rights. And with the Priority Services Register, of course, Ofgem make a lot of noise about, yeah, we care about the most vulnerable, they are our priority. But when it comes to this Priority Services Register, these debt collectors, I said I'm on the Priority Services Register, I said I'm disabled. They said, well, you're going to have to prove it because, of course, as you see, I have invisible disabilities. You wouldn't believe I'm an epileptic. There are over 60 types of epilepsy, and I've got one of the worst types. And when I was applying for my PIP thing, that which took over a year, that was a bit of a nightmare. Most of my benefits got cut off. I was rushed into hospital the very week that I was meant to fill in the 40-page form. I was rushed into hospital because I was going blind and had to have cataract surgery. So I couldn't even see the 40-page form. You only get 1 month to fill it in. So, of course, there's all these conflicting priorities that basically, 1 minute, what's the priority? Do I allow myself to go blind? Do I, apply for the PIP, get a social care worker, which I did, to fill in the 40-page PIP form? It turned out she was dyslexic, knew nothing about law. So when it came to the mandatory reconsideration part, I had to use Windows Magnifier and a magnifying glass to write the mandatory reconsideration. And basically take the case to court myself. Luckily, I won my case, but that's hard for epileptics to win. Not many epileptics win. So, but that was a priority to me. Then after that, the next priority, I was in between time trying to apply to the British Gas Trust Fund to clear my debt, get a boiler, because my boiler broke down 2012, so I spent 10 years having to have a stand-up wash in my cold, drafty house. No carpets, no insulation. It was freezing, but I spent 10 years there in the cold. So if you're worried about turning your heaters down, just imagine that every time you're turning your heaters down. It was cold having a stand-up wash. But I survived it. I've survived it all. And basically, I think this Priority Services Register, we should all be given membership numbers and membership cards. And then when the debt collectors come, or there should be regulations. It should be tightened so that no matter what energy provider you've got, there are the same rules to be applied. And with Ofgem, no, the individual cannot get in contact with them and say, I'm sorry, you're in breach of the Equality Act here, or British Gas or whatever energy company is in breach of the Equality Act here. If you can't get in contact with them, they're a fat lot of use as far as I'm concerned. So, basically it's a matter of, I've been pulled every which way. I've had all these priorities, and then I had to apply to for my state pension credit, of course, the pension service, get all the maths wrong. So I have to go there, and then I've got the debt collectors turn up on my doorstep in October. And they wrote to me, apparently, according to my local MP, in 8 points. Now, British Gas, the Priority Services Register, no, I require large print documents. But no, of course, that was too much for them. They sent them out in 8 points. So even my local MP couldn't read the letters, that were saying that the debt collectors were coming. They acquired this warrant. This has to be stopped. This court practice of just issuing en masse without any evidence that any of these people, apparently it's only 5% of people who are on the priority services register because of the lack of information. Well, clearly there needs to be a spread of information about how this gives you extra protection, and basically it's a matter of teaching people what their rights are, their basic rights, and every citizen should know them. I hope I've said enough, and basically I'd like to thank National Energy Action for help in getting me a boiler last January. I can't tell you the difference it's made. It's gorgeous. Having a shower once a week, only once a week. I'm very strict with myself, but I can't thank National Energy Action. There's a guy called Hugh, if Hugh is here, and he helped me, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Anyway, are we on time? Have I busted the time?
Thank you so much, Geraldine. That was a wonderful, wonderful review, and I really appreciate it. And we didn't pay her to say thank you to us, by the way. Dominic, would you mind me asking you to go to the stand as well now? That's okay. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So firstly I'd like to thank Adam, Anna, Brian and the whole NEA team for the opportunity to be here today. A bit about me, I'm a single dad. I live in a council's estate block, the most deprived one in my estate, with my amazing daughter, and we've always survived off universal credit, different forms of welfare, free school meal vouchers, and we've also always only had pay-as-you-go gas and electric meters. So for the past 15 years, I can't remember a time where I've had more than £20 on my gas and electric meter, and that's like when we're doing really well. So a lot of the time we're on emergency, and when you're on emergency gas and electric, it's like your whole life's on emergency, because if your electric goes in the middle of the night, that means your fridge is gone, that means the stuff in the freezer is probably no good. When your child's really young, you can't go out in the middle of the night and, leave her to go and put money on your gas and electric. And it's all well saying that, you should plan for these things, but if you just don't have it, there's no amount of planning that will change that. It's also, like, I don't want to get emotional, but it's also like it's hard to tell your child in the morning, like, why the lights aren't on, or she can't have a warm shower, or different things in that nature. And for MPs to say that you can feed your family for 30p a day, I can see on my gas and electric meter that, just to boil the chicken, fry it, oven cook it, just the chicken alone, that is more than 30p. I can see it. It's like 90p, and that's without the ingredients themselves. So I share all this to say that the poor have been living in an energy crisis long before I'd even heard of the phrase fuel poverty. And I've been living in fuel poverty, and I think that's why an event like this is so important, because it gives people like me a kind of reference and like a validation to speak on these issues. So when I say thank you, I really mean it. And I wouldn't speak about, so I would say that I've been silenced through snobbery. So prior to the amazing work of Marcus Rashford, I wouldn't talk about free school meal vouchers, the electric being on emergency, the use of the food bank to anyone outside my estate. Next slide, please, if there is one. Oh yeah, no, we can go. That was, but just that it's events like this that help combat the shame and stigma of people, often single parents, often in council estates, and some of the most disadvantaged families that are across our country and globally. Next slide, if that's all right. Oh yeah, so I'll talk about this. So the estate where I live, there's one way in and one way out. I won't make it sound too bad, but the shop on the estate, like, it only sells the lowest quality of food produce. that includes like reading materials, and you can't top up your gas and electric. So for me to top up my gas and electric, I have to travel like over 1.5 miles to top it up. So there's this idea of a food desert. Ironically, I live in the Garden of England, but a food desert is where often poor people have a lack of access to nutrition. So I've come up with this concept of a fuel desert, which I've kind of mirrored the definition, but it's also, I'm probably jumping around, but I'll also add that a lot of my neighbours are less mobile than I am in the blocks. There's 4 blocks. And so especially during COVID restrictions, I saw like how hard it was for them to access both fuel and nutritious food. So I think this concept of fuel deserts also mirrors how fuel poverty isn't something that you experience in isolation. It's something that is often coupled with other inequalities that, as I said, the most disadvantaged experience. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, I've been doing quite a lot of work, thanks to the NEA and the Food Foundation and I've like used every platform that I've been granted to, raise awareness and give an insight into the daily realities of living in poverty. I got the chance to speak on Sky, BBC World Service. I was just in the New Statesman podcast and different magazines, but just like that's kind of just a bit of my journey. But to even get to that stage to be noticed, if you go next slide, please. I had to create, during COVID, I created a book that has some of the leading figures in the social work, academic and practitioner fields who contributed to it. But I had to create a book to kind of give a voice like mine a platform to where it can be heard. And up until then, I was often being asked to write blogs about my lived experience of council estates, or my lived experience of poverty, or my lived experience of food insecurity. And I was sitting there and I'd be in my council block and I'd be like I'm so grateful to have these chances to share and, talk about these issues on a broader platform. But I thought, this isn't my lived experience, this is what I'm actually living. So in my book, I developed this idea from lived experience to living experience. And I think it's quite an important point to note, because it really reflects the urgencies that Adam touched on, of the tensions and urgencies of the inequalities, because it can be too comfortable to bring out people with lived experience of something like, that hardship has been completed, it doesn't show that this is an ongoing issue. So that's, broadly, that's the idea of living experience that I hope stays with you. And just one more slide, please. Yeah, and with what I've been doing, just I hope it's okay to say that there's these ideas of like micro, meso, and macro. Micro being the individual, meso being the community, and macro more being like the entire system that we're trying to challenge. And so fuel poverty as a definition is just an economic issue about the limited amount on your meter, while fuel insecurity, I would say, is the living experience of fuel poverty. And it speaks to the whole impact on your well-being that I've touched upon, but it affects your confidence, your ability to, to eat, cook, to wash, and to more broadly engage in society. So that's more the community level. And then fuel inequality is more around, that this is an unequal distribution of resources that needs to be tackled as a matter of urgency. So I hope there's a little visual, I hope it stays with you as an idea of how to approach these issues. And yeah, I don't know if I've got anything else to say. Yeah, what last thing I say is that, so I think that the poor's lack of access to fuel, it personifies a system that continues to fail us, and through not acknowledging the daily realities of poverty, it it exemplifies a kind of a snobbery that an idea of poor people being undeserving that is unfortunately, I think, entrenched a bit in at least English society. So I hope that's something that this conference can also go a long way to tackle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominic, and thank you, Geraldine. That was an outstanding review of kind of what it is like living in fuel poverty, and I completely agree. It's not just lived experience, it's the living experience. So thank you for sharing that with us. I think I said this to you last night, Geraldine. Arguably, you two are the most important voices throughout this entire conference. So you've said thank you to us, but actually I want to say thank you to both of you, because bringing those experiences to life today is really, really valuable for this conference and really helps set the context. So thank you both of you for that. Without further ado, would you mind if I passed over to you, Rachel? Is that okay? Thank you. Rachel is Chief Executive at Acton Energy.
Good morning, everyone. And I have to say, that was really inspiring, listening to that living experience. And I'm going to start using the word living experience. I think that's much more relevant than lived experience, because so many people are living with the challenge of the energy crisis and the wider cost of living crisis, for that matter. So Acton Energy, we're an energy advice charity based in the West Midlands, so in this fair city. And I'm actually going to talk about the energy advice experience. Over the last 12 months, I have 42 staff, and the majority of them are frontline staff. We've taken about 20,000 calls, or worked with 20,000 householders. Probably could work with double that. So what I want to really do on the next slide is one of our energy advisors, Esther. She's only 26. She's been with us for about 2.5 years, and she's been through the pandemic, so she's worked for us through the pandemic process and the challenges there. And this is how she feels, really, about being an energy advisor. It's just a piece of audio, because she didn't want us to video record her. So hopefully the next slide there is a button on there, if that will work at the back there. Oh, I've got a clicker here. Oh, there you go, you see. There we go. Now, hopefully. Oh, right, okay. I'm very good at IT.
So as an energy advisor, I understand that I'm going to be answering queries about energy-related issues. But when you pick up the call and you can notably tell that this person is coughing, spluttering because of the respiratory conditions that they're dealing with, and where they could potentially heat their home, they can no longer afford to, and the domestic kind of property that they're living in is so poor, it's exacerbating health conditions. You can hear children crying in the background, and you can hear the desperation and anxiety, sometimes the shame in people's voices that they're in this situation and they have to ask for help. People will say things like, all my food has rotted in my fridge and freezer because I can't afford to top up. I've worked all my life, I never thought I'd be in this situation. Are we all in this place? Is everyone dealing with this? We're all in it together, aren't we? They want to find that they're not the only one. You're confronted with people crying, you're confronted with people frustrated, just really, really discouraged. They feel like no one wants to help them, no one wants to listen to them. So obviously we're trained to be active listeners, to give people time and space to explain what's going on, so we can action an effective way of us to support them. But people will respond to how you break down, how you're going to help them in different ways. It may mean that we can't do something there and then. We're not an emergency service. They might start swearing at you and explaining how it's your fault, you have failed, you haven't done something. They're angry and agitated, and we're getting the brunt of that. It may well be that it exacerbates existing mental health conditions. They may start to confide in you and explain that they actually don't feel they have anyone to talk to, and I've had people who are suicidal telling me how they're planning on ending their life, to other people explaining that their mental health conditions so bad they feel like they're going to be forced to rob people to try and make ends meet. You're confronted by these things that are way beyond what an energy advisor is meant to deal with. I'm not a social worker, I'm not an emergency service worker, and I'm not a mental health specialist, but regularly these are the types of issues that are coming through because these persons' basic needs are being undermined by the current situation, and they don't know how to meet them. I feel failed. I don't feel failed, I feel really angry about the situation that energy suppliers are not looking after their customers. How can somebody on a kidney dialysis machine, on a ventilator, on a nebulizer, having maybe, you know, insulin kept in the fridge, why are they on a prepayment meter even when they've been told they've told the energy supplier that they, you know, they have that should never have happened, and I can't believe it still is. So then naturally, when someone's responding to you saying, I haven't eaten for days, how am I going to feed my kids, what are you going to do about it, I'm freezing, I'm cold, I'm too scared to turn the heating on, I know we're not an emergency service, but of course you're going to be moved in that way. So you finish the call and you've done what you've done in the best way, but you do feel like you haven't really done very much, and that sits with you. Are they okay? Are their kids okay? But you have to take the next call because the massive calls coming through is so great, you have to move on.
That's Esther, one of our energy advisors, and you can hear there sometimes how challenging it is, the type of calls that they are taking, the issues that we've already eloquently heard about from our sort of living experience that we're talking about there, you know, that it can be debt, no heating, can't afford that heating, damp and mould growth, worried about turning it on, those health challenges that many people are facing. And it's across all areas of the country. For us across the West Midlands, it's rural areas, we've got urban areas, varying levels of support, and it's really challenging and really important that we support the staff that are working for us. Many of you are in the advice industry in this room here, and many of you are frontline staff, and so we really need to provide the support. So really early in the sort of pandemic, actually, we started to look at what support we can give advisors. One, because we need to keep them, because they are the lifeblood of the support that we give. They are the ones with the sticking plasters. I know we need an awful lot more than sticking plasters, because at the moment that's all we've got is the sticking plaster. We need to spend time talking. I think that's one of the things that's listening and talking to support the many householders that need it. But really, what I think I found really quite upsetting when we're talking to our staff was to ask them how they were feeling. And in the past, doing the job that they do, and actually particularly during the pandemic, they were proud of what they were doing, the support they were providing. But over the last 12 months, the words are much more about feeling helpless, anxious, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of numbers that are coming at them. All the time that phone's ringing. One of my other energy advisors calls it the screaming baby, that telephone. And that's not a place that any energy advisor wants to be, or any advisor, whether you're advising on benefit support or actually frontline staff at a local authority. It's really, really challenging, and particularly from the volunteer side. If you're a volunteer, would you really want to take those sort of calls? And that's the challenge we're facing. So it's really been able to provide that support. So what we've done to sort of support staff, really, is sort of a number of different things. Many of these things I think many of you are probably already doing, so that the mental sort of first aiders. So everyone, the Orange Badge scheme, which has been really great for advisors to help support the people on the calls that they're making. And then regular debriefs, so one-to-ones with staff, talking to each other, but also talking to managers, being able to refer those complex cases when a call is getting really, really difficult, particularly the number of calls where the relationship is around suicide, and there's lots of discussion around suicide. There used to be, I think it was said earlier, I think Danni said it probably, you get maybe one, maybe two a month. They're now pretty much daily. You know, and that's really deeply concerning. So it's how do we, one, support those people, but also how do we support staff? And one of the areas we've been looking at is something called emotional intelligence. So we undertook a 5-week, it was over a 5-week period, 5-workshop programme back in November 21. And emotional intelligence is 2 words really to describe the situation and the way people handle themselves. It's about sort of being smarter with the feelings and looking at how you think and feel and how you can make the best decisions. So we undertook this training course with staff to give them the tools to, when they're dealing with the call and the emotions that generates, how do they then deal with that? How do they make ongoing decisions for them about that call? Quite often we can let things build up, and I think it's one of the common things that, you know, when I first started doing this, I started as an energy advisor, so I've been there. And some of those calls, the more you get that feeling and that anxiousness builds up. So it's what do you do with that anxiety and that anxiousness, and how do you move it forward to in a positive way, or don't take it home in the evening, so that the following day you can get back up there and help and support more people. So it's been a really invaluable part of the work that we do to support householders, is working in that sort of emotional intelligence. And what we do now, every month, we have 1 day a month where any staff can work with them. We use an outside resource, so it isn't someone within our organisation. So it's a really free space for that energy advisor, that outreach worker, to actually have contact with that person and talk about the calls they might be dealing with, but also they themselves. So one of the things we're certainly finding is that the impact of the energy crisis and the wider cost of living crisis is impacting on staff. So our staff, and also the staff of the other organisations we're working with, particularly health staff, nurses, who they themselves are really struggling, and particularly trying to access services outside of that normal 9 to 5. So we're at the moment trying to look at how we can support those members of staff in other services who potentially are working during the day, and that evening piece, and how we can support them. So for me, I normally stand up here and talk about energy efficiency, and I will talk about advice programs, but I really wanted today to just talk about the energy advisors that do the fantastic job, and we really want to make them feel proud again and supported again, because at the moment the level of mental health is really significant, very, very significant. And I was having a conversation with one of the primary care network leads in the region, and they had 63% vacancies, which is absolutely huge. So the mental health support that's required is often falling on the voluntary sector. And that, I think, is a real area that we really need to address and really need to keep talking about, is that if all that's coming onto the voluntary sector, and then ultimately that means at some point it ends up in GP practice, and it's how do we provide that better quality support to staff going forward, and how do we encourage more people into this sector to support the sheer volume of people that we need to support. And I'm getting the finger off Danny there, so I will stop talking. But free to that sounded really bad, didn't it? Sorry, Danny. I've lowered the tone. I've lowered the tone already. But yeah, if anyone has any questions they want to ask about any of the programs we're doing, feel free to do that. Obviously, we operate across this fair city, and it is an amazing, wonderful city and an amazing, wonderful area of the Black Country. But it's got lots of challenges, as I'm sure all of our areas have. So I'm more than happy to talk about that wider piece as well. So thank you.
Just to be clear, I wasn't swearing at Rachel. If possible, could I introduce Mark, thank you, for Area Manager, Head of Prevention at Merseyside Fire and Rescue. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you to Adam for leaving the clock in a very good place at the start of the conference. Similarly, thank you to Rachel for giving me about 30 seconds to give what I need to say. So I'm going to talk to you about fire and rescue. I am from Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, where I'm an officer, and I've been an officer for 30 plus years, so you'll understand that we have some of the most deprived areas in Europe, in some respects, in Merseyside. I stand here on behalf of the National Fire Chiefs Council. We lead a piece of work in relation to cost of living. You will all, I guess, well, most of you in the room will remember a time 30 years ago when we dialed 999 and asked for a fire engine to come to put a fire out, and that's what we did. How do I know? Because I was there. 20 years ago or so, we changed how we work, and we introduced something called prevention. And we're good at prevention. So fire and rescue services up and down this country speak every day with vulnerable people. We go over the threshold of 600,000-700,000 properties every year, and we engage with people. And for some reason, unbeknown to me, people like to hear what we've got to say. And people respond to what we've got to say, and people work with us. And I'm talking about vulnerable people, and I'm also talking about partner agencies. So we're in a really good place to make a difference, and that's what we want to do. We run winter warm campaigns every year. We look at vulnerable people, whether they be over 65s, whether they be people who live in more deprived areas. And historically, this has been really helpful to us in terms of lowering accidental dwelling fires and the associated fatalities with that. Times are different now. Times are very, very different now. We are seeing and hearing different methods of people heating their homes. I'll give you an example. Somebody brings in the patio heater, whether that be with wood or whether it be with patio gas, turn it on inside the property to heat the property. Causes challenges in terms of starting a fire, but it also causes an associated carbon monoxide risk. We have people who will reconfigure their homes, who might be living in a kitchen type area because they can't afford to heat the rest of their property. Gives them challenges in terms of escaping, gives them challenges in terms of hearing a smoke alarm that's in the hall and behind a closed door. Electrical safety, extremely concerningly, there are YouTube videos that show you how to get a rusty nail in between your electrical meter tails, knock it in, bypass the meter. Even more concerningly than that is it's been shared tens of thousands of times. So people are really looking at being creative in terms of how they can save money, so we know that there's a problem and we know that there's a gap that we need to come into to support people. And cooking methods. You know, we've heard some real powerful stories here already this morning, and I'm sure we will do over the period of the conference. People are using barbecues indoors. There was an article in The Guardian about a gentleman in Merseyside, in fact, who was going to beaches and who was collecting the remnants of barbecues, these disposable barbecues. What was he doing them for? So he could take the old coals back to his property, cook on them, and also heat his property. This is with us now, and we know that it's with us, and we can feel it and we can touch it. What have we done as a service? We've come together. I talked about the National Fire Chiefs Council, and it's just that. So every fire and rescue service in England has a chief, so 45 or so chiefs come together, understand what the challenges are that we have facing us, and also understand what we can do to fill those gaps and to help people. So we come together with Home Office, we come together with strategic health leaders, we come together with other partners. We also have partners with living experience. So people have told us how they've come to be in the situation that they're in, and they guide and shape some of the plans that we have. We have a really diverse team, so it's co-chaired by myself in Merseyside and a colleague of mine in London Fire Brigade, so as you'll appreciate, two completely different fire brigades, effectively, with two completely different populations around those fire brigades. And we brought together a toolkit that we've given to fire and rescue services. Okay, so if we think that all fire and rescue services think the same, they don't necessarily. So it's for us as a National Fire Chiefs Council to say, do you know what, here's the problem, here's the resources we've got, here's how we can support people to stay safe and alive in their home, and more than that. The toolkit talks about guidance for fire and rescue services, about all the things I've talked about, in terms of safe cooking and heating. It talks about how we can affect people's behaviour by communicating. And when I say people's behaviour, if I go back a few moments, I just talked about, some of the challenges about people who are making decisions, and I'm pretty sure that when the money is starting to be prioritised, it's not a concern to put a 9-volt battery in the smoke alarm. It's not a concern to make that things are okay in terms of fire safety in a property. It's a concern to feed children. It's a concern to get a little heat, and it's a concern to stay safe and alive. We signpost and we work very closely with agencies, NEA being one of those agencies, Citizens Advice Bureau, Shelter. Fire and rescue staff will do anything for anyone, but we simply can't. But you know what? The bits that we can't do, we will find someone who can do that, and we will pass people on. And that's what we are doing on a very regular basis at this moment. Lastly, I'll talk about communications. So we're very keen to push out with people in our communities. You know what? We're there to support. We can support people with carbon monoxide alarms. We can support people with smoke alarms. We can support people to find the solutions to some of the problems. We've spoken to Radio 5 Live. We talked to BBC. There's a guy called Martin Lewis, who is the money-saving expert, who is a good guy. apparently. He's a good guy because my mum says he's a good guy and he doesn't do politics. So there we go. And Martin Lewis has very kindly offered us the support of his team to push some of our messages out to keep people safe and alive in their home. And the next bit around our comms is talking to people even more and saying, do you know what, come into the fire and rescue service. I think everyone in this room, we've talked about Twitter and hashtags today, haven't we? Older, more vulnerable people, there's no Wi-Fi. There's often no mobile phone, so we're talking to people to encourage relatives. Knock on any fire station door. Knock on the door of any fire station. And any member of our staff throughout the United Kingdom, through England and Wales, plus Scotland who we speak to, plus Ireland who we speak to, any member of the Fire and Rescue Service will support people to stay safe and alive in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for giving your views of how it's been living through this crisis, particularly the view from the front line as well as the living experience, apologies, Dominic, I will learn. I'd like to open it up to the floor now for questions from the floor. I think we have two people in the audience that might be able to give a bit of insight from their view of the front line. Both Pauls, one from Christians Against Poverty. Paul, are you there? No. Paul from CSE. Hurrah, thank you, Paul. Paul's just going to give a bit of an overview of their experience as well. And if you've got questions, please put your hands up and Nina will run around with a mic. Either, whichever you prefer.
It's question time.
Question time.
Question time. Hi, yes, my name's Paul Winnie. I'm from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. We're an energy advice charity based in Bristol. And much like you've heard already today, I just thought I'd give you a brief update on where we're at in the crisis as well. So last financial year, coming out of the pandemic, we spoke to over 15,000 people, which is a record for CSE, and collectively saved them 3.2 million on their bills, and a lot of that was consisting of vouchers and direct grants to help with affordability. And the vast majority of those people that we spoke to were in fuel poverty or at risk of fuel poverty, and a significant proportion had listed a health condition. So the type of demand that we're seeing now through the current crisis, we know that the numbers are going to increase. We've seen a greater demand due to the cost of living. We're estimating at the moment about 30 to 40% increase, although we won't be officially looking at the numbers until March. Winter is always our busiest time, and we're seeing at the moment monthly inquiry numbers beating previous quarterly winter numbers, which is quite significant. It's not just the increase in demand though as well, there's been a big shift in the type of advice we're giving. And we've seen a fourfold increase in demand for financial support and energy debt. And during this time, we've strengthened our partnerships with food banks, and we're making now 10 times more referrals than we did previously. And like Rachel touched on, the sort of nature of the calls are getting more complex. They're harder to deal with. People are increasingly in distress and having to make choices like basic essentials from food, energy and clothing. We're speaking to people whose mental health is suffering as a result of the cost of living crisis as well. A few years ago, it was quite rare for us to speak to someone who was feeling suicidal. Unfortunately, that isn't the case anymore, and it's almost a daily basis. We also have to deal with people's immediate crisis with their energy supplier. So if we don't help them stop the threatening letters from the bailiffs, then they don't have the mental bandwidth often to engage with us. And rather than speak to someone once or twice, we're now speaking to people on multiple occasions, dealing with a vast variety of complex issues. Unfortunately, our funding isn't sufficient to speak to everyone on multiple occasions, and we've had to make some tough choices about who's eligible for in-depth casework. So again, the impact on our energy advisors, again, they're doing an amazing job, but it is a relentless wall of work that we're seeing. It's often upsetting. During the lockdown, we introduced measures such as buddy groups to help address this, and we've also introduced a mentoring programme to support new staff who we've recruited fairly recently to help with the demand. And this has continued as we've moved out of the pandemic into the energy crisis. As a charity, it's really challenging. There's been a huge increase in demand. It takes longer to help people, and there's a twofold financial impact on us. It takes about 3 months to train an energy advisor fully, and this cost isn't covered by the funding that we have, so it comes out of our charitable reserves. And the complexity of cases means it takes longer to provide the support needed per client, and projects often go over budget. And just sort of to finish up, I just thought I'd share some recent examples from what our energy advisors are hearing people are doing to cut costs. So things like going to bed early to stay warm, only heating one room and avoiding using central heating at all, spending the day in a heated cafe or library, cooking using alternative sources like portable stoves or barbecues, not even cooking at all, not inviting friends or family into the home, using unsafe, unserviced heating appliances or inappropriate devices like ovens to stay warm, cutting back on electricity, using candles instead of lights, leaving the curtains closed all day and putting paper over the windows, cutting back on buying essential personal items for food, eating only cold meals, or relying on food banks, formal borrowing through credit cards and loans, and informal borrowing through friends and loan sharks, marking the bath to reduce the amount of water each time, showering away from home in workplaces and leisure centres, and cutting back on personal hygiene products, and deciding not to pay the water bill in order to pay higher priority bills such as energy and council tax. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that overview. As very well reflected from Rachel earlier, this seems to be a very consistent challenge on the front line for energy advisors. We're all seeing similar coping strategies, desperate circumstances and challenging discussions with our client group. Did anybody have any questions? We've got a panel of 4 experts here. Did anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask? I see some hands at the back. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you. Ollie Gray from Caris. We work with energy companies on warm home discount, but we also work with local authorities, charities, housing associations to distribute hardship payments. Rachel, I was really interested in your what you're talking about with support for staff. One of the things that we find when we're talking to organisations in that social care sector is they're worried about the impact on their workers in terms of paying their bills, because they tend to be, unfortunately, lower paid. I don't know what the answer is, but I just wonder if you had any thoughts about that in terms of how we can support that resilience of our workers, not only to deal with really horrible case studies as we've heard so powerfully today, but also in terms of managing their finances.
Oh, it's automatically on.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think what we're certainly seeing is the people that it's impacting are, people talk about people in receipt of benefits, but actually it's people that have got incomes of 30,000 plus. So, and it's really, really, really difficult. I think we certainly had a conversation with one of our funders, and one of their staff contacted us saying, I'm one of these people. There's just me on my own with my 2 children. What can you do to help me? And actually, it's about really changing some of the eligibility levels of some of the funding that we've got. I think particularly the Household Support Fund enables us to do that. So we've been really lucky to have a local authority that's listening to the living experience of people and actually looking at things in a different way. It's not giving 50, 60 pounds, it's giving 300, 500 pounds to enable people to actually have a winter of less stress, and that they haven't got to keep going out and topping up that meter. And that's what we need. And I think one of the other things I think we really, really need to do is perhaps change some of our timings of how we deliver works. So we've certainly run a number of evening sessions so that we can work with those people that are particularly nursing staff, actually are probably the key staff there, and also teachers and teaching assistants, so that we are there longer than the 5 o'clock period, so there's someone they can come out to talk to, and just making sure we just try loads of different access points. I think the digitally excluded isn't just about older people, and I think sometimes we forget that the digitally excluded can be a whole plethora of people, so it's just making sure that we provide the support across the range more than anything else, and working together as partners. I think that's one of the key things. We've been around a long time across our area that we've been serving, and for us it's about working in partnership. We can't do this on our own as Acton Energy, but we can help together. And I think probably the only other thing I'd say, and then I'll get off my high horse, is that I think a lot of the money that's out there at the moment, the support funding, is very much a sticking plaster, and there isn't any. It's like an admin budget, particularly the household support funds, that. So it's great that the money is there, but it doesn't provide any advice and long-term support for householders and residents, and that's what we need, that long-term advice piece. So we need to do long-term complex casework with people, and no one wants to fund that, and that's where it's really challenging. Everything is very output-based rather than outcome-based, and I think we need to change how we deliver a lot of the funding schemes that are out there.
Absolutely. Just from NEA's perspective, we've been collecting a lot of insight from some of our partners and stakeholders in some of the investment they've been doing within their staff, and things have included having food available in the kitchen all the time, making sure the office is a really nice environment to be in, so it's a warm, comfortable, welcoming space so that people feel comfortable when they're in work. Looking obviously at salaries and cost of living increments and the such like, but also just making sure that anything that they're offering out in terms of advice provision is also available internally, so workshops on money management, on energy, on benefits, so that staff, particularly those on the lower end of the salary scale, are able to access all of those same support services that we offer out to all of our clients. So that's just a few, but happy to have a follow-up conversation as well, because we've been trying to do quite a lot of research to reflect on our own sort of response as well. There was another question, I believe, at the back.
Hi. Jo Harry from Care and Repair Company. Sorry, I've got my arms full of paper. Thank you to everyone who's contributed so far. Completely echo all the experiences that have been shared. And Dominic, living experience, fantastic. I will also be using that going forward. I just wanted to share, after a quick conversation with Danni last night, so Care and Repair Cymru is an older person's housing organisation. We're a representative organisation of a movement of 13 independent agencies covering the whole of Wales. We focus on housing. What we do is support older people to live independently in the private housing sector for as long as they possibly can. So we're best known for adaptations, grab rails, that kind of thing. I run our fuel poverty project across Wales, and things are desperate. I can echo everything that I've heard, and the stories are devastating. The team of home energy officers who are really skilled, so we deliver a technical energy efficiency service as well as an holistic case service, talking about boundaries and what is within our capability, and then also the increased complexity, and so the increased cost of delivering what we can deliver for the limited pot of funds that we get is difficult, and we are well supported by funders. I just wanted to share that last week I collated some statistics from the 1st of August to the 30th of November. We've helped thousands of people on the project, which has been called 70 Plus Cymru. Of 99 clients we captured the information for, 99 right across Wales, the average spend on fuel was 20%. On average, our clients are living in severe fuel poverty. And just to give you an example, the swing was from 2% to 74%. These figures haven't been published yet, and they will be, but it's desperate. In Cardiff and Vale, we're looking at an average of 27% spend on energy and water. We include water in the spend as an essential expenditure. In the northwest and central North Wales, we're looking at an average of 23% spend, so an average of people living in severe fuel poverty. So I just wanted to share that. We're all singing from the same sheet, and I'm really hoping that these next couple of days we can make a decision going forward of some things we can all do. I would like to ask Dominic and Geraldine, what would you do? My ask would be something simple for us we could all get together and do, is get energy suppliers to let people access a human to help them with problems. So it's impossible. You know, our project workers, and I know it's echoed from speaking to a number of people last night, might spend an hour on the telephone trying to get through to a supplier to resolve a simple issue that is causing a customer so much distress, so much. They're not, it's not supposed to be that way. That would be my simple ask. I have many more complex ones. But Geraldine and Dominic, I wonder, from your living experience, what would you ask for that you think we could all come together and start pushing and campaigning for? Thank you.
Right, well, you're dead right. You're on the money when it comes to there's no point talking as individuals to energy companies, and of course you're not allowed to talk to Ofgem. They, you know, make all this noise, but they don't really give a damn about vulnerable people. So it's down to debates in Parliament, in select committees, in Parliament, and basically, shall we say, getting tough on energy companies and say, look, these are going to be the rules from here on in. And basically, you have to comply with them. If you don't comply with them, then we're going to get tough on the regulator, and the regulator better start fining, you know, big bucks, these energy companies who are at the moment coining it in. Of course, they're raking it in. And of course, a lot of politicians have stocks and shares, so they've got no interest in sort of changing the crooked system. Let's face it, they don't give a damn about the poor and the vulnerable. They like ticking boxes, but that's just sound bites. It's just a load of BS, and I don't mean big society. So, so basically, the business of Parliament, I mean, forget PMQs, it's seriously boring, and they just argue away. And but it's the select committees, and that things really happen. And basically, there needs to be more work going on there. So, as a first step, you know, more people need to find out who the hell their local MP is, start writing to their local MP, and basically start raising this as a question in the House of Commons, and basically that there should be a debate in several of the select committees. So that will be the business, the energy, work and pensions select committee, equality, etc. So I'll wrap it up there.
Thanks, Geraldine. Dominic, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. Sorry. Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to say, if it's okay, if anyone wants to like support my concept of living experience, which has been amazing to hear, my book is on Amazon and priced very reasonably. So please do. Thank you. I'll give a reflection, is that I was driving and it was Channel 4, not Channel 4, what's it called? Radio 4. And they were doing a thing, it was about just before Christmas, so 2 months ago, or a month ago, and it was about fuel poverty. And they were interviewing a very well-spoken lady who was doing her best, and it was about topping up her gas and electric, and so it was around the struggles of what people call prepay meters. I call them pay-as-you-go meters, and I've had them my whole life. But it was around, she was describing her actually putting the key into the machine, like the meter, and pressing a button, and that like topping up the meter. And I don't know, I guess you have to have the living experience to understand how that isn't the issue. The issue isn't the actual putting the key in the meter, it's accessing somewhere where that will accept money that you can put on your meter. So in one level, it shows how people with positions of influence have such a distance from the realities of fuel poverty and more generally food insecurity and other issues that the poor experience daily. So what I didn't say is you can only top up my gas and electric key with cash. There's no cash point in my estate, and the shop doesn't do it. So it's literally like, just to top up your gas and electric is a whole, I don't know what the best word to describe it as, but it's a whole like procedure that takes a lot of engagement and a lot of energy, and it kind of marginalizes you from from the experiences other people are having. So I just thought it just popped into my mind as you were talking. But in terms of the question, I think it's really important that all the policies that actually disproportionately impact the poor, that have heard from people with living experience of poverty, not people maybe, you know, and God bless them, that were poor 20 years ago, but people that are actually living in poverty, because I have an understanding of the intersecting state mechanisms that can provide insight that people that haven't lived in council estate poverty wouldn't understand. And it's people, and it needs to be noted, people in rural poverty, but that needs to be reflected. And yeah, I'll just end by saying I've got a campaign that's supported by the Food Foundation and hopefully yourselves after this, and it's called Food is Care, and it's around the food inequality. I noticed as a trainee social worker that children in care were experiencing the same food insecurity and lack of access to nutrition as I was when I got home. And so, yeah, check it out. It's going to be coming more soon, and a second book. And thank you for listening. Cheers.
You'll be rich before you complete.
So that draws an end to this session, and once again I want to say thank you to all of the speakers today. It has been really, really profound and powerful listening to all of you and your experiences. This session was deliberately thought-provoking. It sets the context for the whole of conference. It's there to help give you an idea for who you want to engage with, who you want to talk to. I will say there is obviously frustration, which is often targeted at industry. We have a huge number of industry reps in the room. Have a conversation with them. They're also human beings and on the tough end of some of this crisis, so it's worth talking to them. There seems like there's a number of quick wins, easy things that we can do in collaboration to improve the experience of people struggling through this crisis. But to do that, we have to start a conversation. So really, really use this conference to do that. In the next session, picking up the pieces, you'll hear a review of the national responses so far, and you'll also hear from Matt Copeland, our Head of Policy and Public Affairs, issuing a statement on the key findings from our fuel poverty monitor. That brings together a huge number of your insights and number of stakeholders that even aren't here today, and highlights some of the key actions needed to avert the worst impacts of this crisis. So should be a very, very, very good session, lots of great speakers, and yeah, I hope you enjoy your time at conference, and thank you everybody for your contributions.